Okay, folks, it is time to talk about sorting or dragging different items in a list. So yesterday I put out a video on animating reorderings from the backend, and I don't know, I had a lot of fun with it, and some people asked about, well, how do we handle dragging and dropping? Like instead of hitting a shuffle button where these all shuffle around, if you drag one of these things to reorder the list manually. So this is something that I've found, I've actually done before, and I've already explored this, and there's actually a plugin called Livewire Sortable that makes this whole thing really easy. You drop in a CDN, and then you can add a few little handlers, but I thought, I don't know, this is an exploration. Why don't we try to build this by hand, and then understand the problem a little bit more deeply. So we're going to use the browser's native draggable API. So here's the backend class of this things, component where we just have an array of things. They each have an ID and a title, and then we for each through them in Blade and list them out. We've already added the wire key so that things, order properly when Livewire does its update. And that's it. It's extremely simple, and it's totally static right now. There's nothing dynamic that we can do. But check this out. If I add draggable equals true right here. Okay, so now I can drag this thing. This is just a browser thing. Most things aren't draggable by default. Selected text is draggable, images are draggable, but everything else is not draggable by default. So if you add draggable equals true, now the thing becomes draggable and unlocks this entire API of things. So I think what we should do first, let's do it on the front end. Let's make draggable behavior where I can drag this do dishes and indicate that it's being dragged over something, with like a different background color. And then when I drop it, I want to insert it into the DOM right here, okay? So like if we drag scrub toilet up, then it should insert right there, okay? And then we'll talk about how this pertains to Livewire and whatnot. But first, we're gonna learn a little bit about draggable stuff. So let's do that. Here's our welcome.blade.php. This is the Blade file that, is our layout where we're just including our things component. So we can add a script tag right below Livewire scripts, below Livewire, after it loads its assets. And then here's where we're going to do our thing. So what's our thing going to be? Let's talk a little bit about strategy. So this whole draggable API in the browser works with events. So that's going to be our thing, where when you start dragging, an event's going to be fired called, drag start. When you stop, it's going to drag end. Drag, there's drop. There's all these different events. So we're going to need to attach event handlers to the elements that we care about. So this is what we're going to call them. We're going to say this one's going to be wire draggable. Should we do that? Yeah. I want to do just draggable, but that's an actual attribute. So do we do that? Yeah. I don't know. Let's say drag. All right, we're going to do this. We're going to say drag group. Okay. That's what we're going to say. We're going to say drag group. Nope, we're going to say drag root. Okay, and then each item is going to have a drag item attribute applied to it. So we have drag root and we have drag item. So let's get this in JavaScript. We're going to say let root equal document.querySelector drag root. Okay, and now we can get all of the drag items inside of that. So we'll say root.querySelector, except this time we're going to do query selector all. And then inside of there, it's going to be drag item. Okay. Now this, I don't know if, maybe this is obvious to everybody, but I don't know. I think it's a good reminder that you can query selector off not the document, but any element, and it will look inside of that element for things. So it's a way to scope your selectors. So we're saying look for all drag items inside of a drag root, and then we're going to for each through these, and we'll call this L. Okay. And now inside here, we can attach all our handlers to each one of these LIs. So each LI is going to get its own set of listeners, and we're going to look at that. So let's do l.add event listener. And the first one we're going to listen for is drag start. And then we'll have this who's or doozy, and we're going to pull in the event. And then here, let's just console.log out, let's say start, okay? Look in the browser. And now when I drag, okay, look at that. The console just logged start. Let me make that a tad bigger. Okay, cool. So we have that start that got fired, and let's keep going. There's a few other ones that we want. There's drag end, which is going to be the opposite of start. So let's do end. And actually, while we're at it, let's just go ahead and add all the ones that we're going to need. So we're going to need drag start. We're also going to need drag enter. We're going to need drag leave. And the final boss is going to be drop, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So we have start, enter, leave, and end. And we'll match these as well. This one will say enter, this one will say leave. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Okay, so I have the start and I have an enter because if you think about it, this element, every element has all these listeners. So I've started this one and I've entered into this one. If I drag away, it's going to leave, okay? Now if I enter this other one, because this one has an enter listener, it's going to fire that enter. And if I leave, it's going to fire that leave. Okay, so we're going to use enter and leave right now to actually, before we even add any fun styling, let's get drop working. So let's create a new one. And where should we put it? Let's do it right after start. And this one, it's not called drag enter. It's just called, or it's not called drag drop. It's just called drop. Okay. And then here we'll say drop. Okay. So with any luck, we drag this. And now if we let go, we expect it to say drop, but it never said drop. So let me save you all the documentation searching. It's super weird why this happens, but in order for something to be a drop zone, which means it will, like listen for drop, the enter has to do an e.prevent default, which, if you're familiar with, I don't know, if you're in a front end at all, and this is I'm sort of expecting that you're into the front end a bit because this is a little bit of some deeper stuff, but you can always prevent default on an event, which will stop it from continuing on its journey as an event. So if we, actually that might not even be true. I get confused with stop propagation and prevent default, whatever. So we're going to e.prevent default for drag enter. And we also need to do it for another event that we're not even going to use. There's this drag over event, which just for fun, why don't I show you what drag over does so that you can just use it if you ever need it. So watch the console. Okay, drag over just fires over and over when something is over something. And if I leave, there we go, over stops, then over starts again. So I could see that might be useful for something so that you don't have to listen for enter and leave to do something. But I don't know, that just seems like it's just hammering like over and over. And I feel like I would have to have some request animation frame optimization. I don't know. We don't care about that. All we care about with drag over is that it prevents default, because that's all we actually need it to do, which is super weird again, but drag enter and drag over need to both e.prevent default to be able to listen for drop. Don't know why, that's just the way it is. So if I grab this fold laundry, we have start enter, okay? Now we have enter and leave because I left one and I entered the other. And now if I let go, we have drop and then end. So this is perfect. Drop is working now. We'll clean this up just the tiniest bit. Okay, so we are rocking and rolling. We have all the events set up, which is fantastic. And now what we want to do, well, first let's add a little bit of highlighting so that if I drag do dishes over something else, the background colors change. So this is pretty simple. Instead of console.logging enter, we're going to say e.target, which e.target is always going to give you the element that the event was called or was like dispatched from. So it actually, in this case, is going to line up with L because we're listening for this drag enter event on the L. And so e.target is going to be L. But as a rule of thumb, I try to stick with using e.target because sometimes you're listening for drag enter. Like you could actually listen for this on the window and it would pick up all the drag enters, and then you could use e.target to get the individual element that it was fired from. So whatever, I just say whatever you do, just commit to it. Either you're going to use L across the board or e.target. For us, we're going to use e.target when we're inside of a listener. But remember, e.target is just getting the DOM element. It's the same thing as this. These two things are the exact same. So we have e.target, and we're going to use class list. It's a really nice class manipulation API in JavaScript, .add, and we'll say bg yellow 100. Okay, so let's load that in the browser and check it out. There we go. Okay, so when we enter, they all turn to that background color of yellow, and now we want to do the inverse on drag leave. So let's do that. Instead of add, it's going to be remove. Okay, and now check it out. This is perfect. So now as we drag around, we get that yellow. Okay, so if I let go, drop got fired, and leave never got a chance to fire because we didn't leave the element, we just dropped it. So we're also going to do that classless remove inside of our drop. Okay, great. And so now if we drop, there we go. All right, so let's move on to the functionality. I want to actually replace this element with scrub toilet when I release it. I want scrub toilet to be inserted right before this element. So let's do that. So on drop, that's where the magic is going to happen. We're basically going to be like, we want to get the original element that's being dropped. So whatever, get the dragging element. Yeah, let's say get the dragging element, because if you think about it, drop is going to fire, like if we scrub toilet over clean counters, that's weird. All right, if we have this over this clean counters and I release it, the drop event's getting fired on clean counters, but the element that we want to insert is the one that was dragging. So we're going to get the dragging element, and then we're just going to insert it before the dropped element. The drop target maybe is a better word. And that's the deal. This should be fairly straightforward. So you would think this is what would be awesome, that we could say let dragging L equals, and then actually we'll just call this dragging. No, we'll call it dragging L equals. And then it'd be cool if it was like if the event object had something for us, like E dot original element or something like that. And it has sort of similar things, but it doesn't do what you'd think it would. Like you can't easily get the source of the drop, which is so frustrating. And if you look in the docs, they tell you, oh, what you have to do is on the drag start, you have to set, there's this like, what is it? It's like data transfer on the event, data transfer dot set data. And then it's like super weird. It's not like a key value pair. It's like you have to put like the MIME type, and then you'd have to say like some selector, like the ID or something. And then inside here, you could say data transfer dot get data text plain, and then whatever. It's just ridiculous. And it's so silly because I don't know. I don't like it at all. So I have a better idea, I think, and we're going to do it. So what we're going to do is when you start dragging an element, we're going to add an attribute called dragging to that element. So as soon as you click on an li and hold it, there's going to be a new attribute called dragging. And then when you're done, it's going to remove it. But here inside of drop, we can just say e dot, or actually what we'll do is root. We'll get the root, and then we'll do our query selector to get the dragging element inside of the root. And that's what we want to do. So let's add this dragging attribute to the li. So on drag start, when we start dragging, we're going to say e dot target dot set attribute, and we'll say dragging is true. Okay. And now on drag end, we're going to do the inverse. So on drag end, we will say, well, why isn't that working? Grab that, paste Aruni it in, and now instead of set attribute, we're going to remove attribute dragging. Okay, so let's take a look at this inside our element inspector. We're going to look at scrub toilet. Now look at, there's no dragging attribute here. If I start dragging it though, now check it out. We get dragging equals true. And now if I let go, dragging goes away. So this is perfect. Okay. So now that we have this dragging attribute, once we drop, we can easily find the dragging L right there. So we can look at dragging L. That's perfect. So that's get the dragging element. And now we want to insert it before the drop target. And remember, the drop target is e.target, the thing that has the drop listener. So there's this awesome method that I just learned about the other day. Before, if you wanted to insert an element before something, you'd have to go like up to the parent element and then do something like insert or insert before and then pass in the element. I don't know. It just felt kind of roundabout. Well, now in modern browsers, there's this awesome little thing called before or after, where you just pass an element and it'll move it to before the element that you're calling before on. So in this case, we want to add dragging L right before the thing that we're our drop target there. So let's take a look. We have scrub toilet. Okay. Well, it just worked, but it's slow. When you have the element thing open, it just like the events fire slowly. So check this out. We have exactly what we want. And now if I let go of scrub toilet, it is going to be in the place of clean counters, and it's going to have been inserted one above. So there's actually a weird UI thing that I just encountered building this, that when I'm dragging up, I expect that insert before thing to work. But when I'm dragging down, check this out. Once I let go, it's like one above. And it's really weird, but like the direction, because, well, I guess the reason it's weird is because when we're dragging down, this thing gets removed from the top, which shifts everything up, where when we're dragging up, we haven't shifted anything from the top. So the solution to this is to have some conditional where you check if something is before and whatever. I'm just not going to go that deeply right now. So it's as simple as you putting in a conditional somewhere. But I'm not going to deal with that. Really, you would put it right here. You would do some conditional that's like, if this thing is before this other thing, then either do after or before. But we're just going to stick with before right now to make things a little bit easier. Okay, so we have our front end completely done. We've implemented our own little, dragging system with UI feedback. There's a ton of different things you could do. Just so you know, you can set the image that gets dragged, so you can customize this. For example, if you had a little handle that you drag the handle, but you want to show the entire element or whatever, you can set that. What else can you do? Okay, instead of highlighting the background colors, you could insert a temporary element placeholder above it, like a little half-sized element, or you could even insert a faux element like the scrub toilet. You could even have that inserted wherever. So yeah, there's lots of customization you can do. Go to the MDN docs for all that draggable stuff if you want to do that. Now let's get into the Livewire part. Let's get into how we can make this work with Livewire. So think about this for a minute. We have this front end stuff working, but what do we want to do? When we drop, we want to actually communicate that drop to the back end. So presumably we're going to fire some Livewire method. So let's open up that things component. So let's say that we have some method like reorder that reorders these based on information from the front end. So I would expect that from the front end, I would get a bunch of keys back, like item key or IDs. Let's say this. Let's call this ordered IDs. Okay, so we're reordering and we get the new order IDs. So the IDs in the proper order. So right now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's just the way that, things are working, whatever. It's sorting by ID, I suppose. So what we would want to do is get the new ordered IDs. And let's say if we moved this one up one, it would be 1, 2, 3, 5, 4. And then we basically, we'll use some PHP code to sort these up. And then we need to somehow specify the IDs and get the IDs in a list and whatever. So we'll see how it works. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that you have to implement the ordering change in the back end. So it's this really cool concept where if we do this front end reordering first, which fires off a Livewire request that's going to reorder the items, then re-render the HTML in the proper order, then that new HTML is going to come back. That new HTML from the server it's going to basically mirror what's already been done in the front end, so there'll be no DOM diff. Where right now, let's check this out. Let's just do something like this. Inside of our JavaScript, once the user drops and we do all our work, let's just refresh the Livewire component, okay? So to do that, first we need to get the component. Now, let's see. So we need the actual Livewire component. Quick refresher. Every Livewire component has a front-end JavaScript object, and you can get it like livewire.first is going to get you the first one on the page. So if we do livewire.first, we can call methods on it. And one magic method we can call is refresh, and there we go. It actually is going to run a refresh method. So we have, whatever. We're just going to do that for now. So in this case, we can't really just use Livewire first. If we did livewire.first, that would be kind of bad because we might have multiple components on the page. So we want to do Livewire find, and then we want to get the current Livewire ID. Every Livewire component has an ID. And if we take a look in the HTML, notice here's the root of the Livewire component, and it has this wire::ID attribute with a unique key. So if we grab that key, and if we do something like Livewire find, and then that key, we get the right thing. We can look at the whatever. We could call, methods on it and whatever we want to do. Okay, great. So how do we get that? Well, we can take this root. So let's I guess we can just take the target. We'll say e.target.closest, which it's basically the opposite of query selector. Query selector looks for selectors down the DOM, where closest looks for selectors up the DOM. Closest is incredibly useful. So we want to look up until we find wire ID. And here's a little gotcha. It's going to say invalid selector. You have to escape that colon. So we're going to get the wire ID, and then we're just going to get that attribute value. We're going to say wire ID. And for some reason, when you're getting an attribute, you don't need to escape the colon, but otherwise you do. I don't know. It's weird. Okay, so that's component. And then let's say component.call, and we're just going to call a refresh on it. Okay, great. And then we'll have our network tab open, and we'll see. So if I move scrub toilet to fold laundry, Okay, it actually worked, but we got a console error. Component is not defined because we misspelled component. Huzzah. All right, now check this out. Scrub toilet to fold laundry, and you saw that little blip. It moved for a second on the front end, but then the network request came back and changed it all back because the HTML from the server is different. So we need to actually instead call some method like reorder and pass it a list of all of the keys in the order. So this is what we're going to do. Hopefully this isn't too confusing. Drag item, we're going to specify the ID. So the first one's going to be 1, the second one's going to be 2. So let's echo out item ID in PHP. Okay, and now each of these, drag item is still going to work the same way, but it's actually going to have a value now. It's going to have this ID. So this is pretty cool. What we can do is let's say let order IDs equal, and then here we're going to say root dot query selector all drag item. So we're getting all the drag items, and then we're going to map through them, like map, and we're going to get each item. So we'll just call this L, I guess. No, I don't like L because we already used L earlier. So let's say item L. Okay. And then we're going to return item L dot get attribute drag item. Okay. And that's going to get the value of this drag item attribute. And because we're mapping this, this is just going to be an array of all these keys. One quick note, as always, you can't map on query selector all. You have to array.from it because it's like a node list or something like that. So we've array.from, we have let order IDs, and now we can component.call reorder and pass in the order IDs. So this is going to just give us all those IDs in the order that they exist in the DOM. So hopefully you're following this still. Let's go to the component, and now inside of reorder, let's just dd ordered IDs. Okay, and yeah, we're going to do that. So now, undefined variable $item. Where did that happen? Right here. Because it's called thing. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to move scrub toilet to fold laundry and let go. And now we have this DD of these IDs. So look at the payload that got sent to the server. 1, 2, 3, 5, 4 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because we reordered that ID. So this is perfect. It's working really well. So here, now we need to do PHP code. We need to change this things array to be a reordered list of those things. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. And it's a really fun technique is if all of these were elements in a database and they all had a column called order. And then, maybe here or somewhere you have things order by order or sort by order. Then you can simply just go through and update each ID, each order to be that order. And then, they'll naturally reflect. But whatever, we're going to actually modify this array itself. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say this arrow things. Now buckle up. There's going to be a little bit of collection wizardry here. So let's collect ordered IDs. So this is the list of IDs, the new ordered list. We're going to put them in a collection so that we can map through them. And let's say this is going to be an ID. Okay. And we're going to array this at the end so that we're not returning a collection. All right, why is this yelling at me? Because, oh my gosh, you are witnessing the PHP JavaScript thing that you've all done, I'm sure. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to map through each of these IDs and return its corresponding row. And the result is going to be a reordered things array. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to return, and we're actually going to collect. No, we're not going to collect. What are we going to do? We're going to say this arrow things, and we're going to wrap that in a collection, collect that. Then we're going to say where ID is, because these are integers and the incoming is string, we're going to cast to an int, where the ID is ID, and then we have to call first because where is going to return multiple. Maybe there is a where first on collections, I don't know. First, and then to array the entire thing should do it. So let's just see if that works. So if we grab scrub toilet and move it to fold laundry, okay, there we go. Check it out. And now fold laundry over there, dust shelves, up to do dishes, and that's it. Check it out. And we're actually sending AJAX requests and everything. If we move, let's slow down the API call. If we grab scrub toilet to clean counters, the front end does its work. Now the request is out. The HTML comes back, but it matches the existing HTML exactly, so we don't see any update, which is so cool. So that is essentially it. I think there's one more little piece that we should handle here. We're just depending on this reorder method, where instead, what if we set the value of this to be the method you want to call? So in this case, we could say like let method equals, and now we'll say root.get attribute drag root, okay? And then here we can pass in that method. So now this is totally dynamic. We've created kind of our own little plugin where you can say drag root and then the Livewire method you want called, and then drag item where you pass in the value you want passed back to the server. So we can drag them around, and now we have perfect drag and drop with completely native JavaScript and Livewire, and it's all really beautiful and gives you this is a perfect example of an optimistic UI experience, where the front end is doing work instantly, and then the back end is lazily updating itself. So we don't have to wait for that entire round trip. It's not like when we let go, this whole thing turns into a loading wheel and then shows, although you could do something like that. This is an optimistic UI experience because if you're doing the work on the front end and the back end properly, they're always going to match up. So that is how you implement this thing on your own. Let's take a quick peek at how you can totally forego this technique entirely and just use the plugin that exists. So let's do that. So take a look at this. Livewire sortable. If you go to GitHub, Livewire/sortable, this is a plugin that's been out for quite a while. We're just going to grab the CDN for it and pop it right below the existing Livewire scripts. And that's actually it for the JavaScript stuff. We don't have to configure anything. And now here, there's a little bit different API. Instead of drag root and drag item, you can look at the docs here and it shows you it's wire : sortable and then the method you want. So let's make that. Let's say wire sortable. And then here it's wire sortable dot item. So let's do that. It's going to be wire sortable dot item. Okay. And let's try it. Now it's not going to work perfectly. Actually, we're going to get an error, but we'll talk about that in a sec. If we take scrub toilet and we move it up to scrub. Yeah. Okay. So check this out. This is how this plugin works actually. Is it because I'm using Shopify's sortable or draggable and sortable plugin under the hood, you're getting a whole lot of extra stuff for free. In fact, you don't even need to have draggable equals true. It's all just going to work by itself. But actually, I like draggable equals true because I think it's is it a better experience? No, I don't know. It's the same, but whatever. Check this out. When I release, look, they all just wipe to do dishes. Like clearly we have some brokenness here. So to fix this brokenness, let's take a look at what is coming back to the server. So let's take a look at this ordered IDs. So before we just had a list of numbers. So if we move this and now we look, notice it's not a list of numbers. It's an array of arrays and each one has order and value. So in this case, they all actually happen to match up. But kind of the nice thing here is wire sortable.item, you could put anything in here. You could put a string, you could put any value and it's going to come through as the value. And then the order is always going to be the order of, of all the things in the list. It's going to give you the order. So yeah. So in this case, really what we want to do is when we loop through order IDs, this ID field here, this is going to be an array where we just want to get value. Okay. So let's do that. Go back to business. We drag do dishes right here, let go, and then there it is. It works perfectly. One of the other cool things about this, you can pretty easily add handlers. So let's say that inside of here, inside of this li, we're going to add a div. We're going to make it flexbox, and we're going to say justify between, so that we have one thing on the left and one thing on the right. And now the thing on the left is going to be, this is going to be the title. Okay. And then the thing on the right is going to be a handle. So in this case, I don't know, let's make a star. That's going to be our little handler. And here, if we say wire sortable dot handle, it should treat the star as a handle. So let's try. I'm actually shooting from the hip. I didn't even look that up. Wire sortable dot handle. Yep. Okay. So now if we're dragging these, they're not moving at all. Okay. But if we drag, now if we drag the little asterisk, that's our drag handle. So that's a nice little extra thing that you get. But there it is. That's how to do sortable, draggable stuff. This sortable plugin also has a whole new API for sortable groups. And this basically allows you to have multiple lists where you can drag items from one list to the other. It's pretty crazy, but the API, where you have your sortable item, whatever, you still have all that stuff. except you also have a sortable group and then a sortable group, item group, whatever. A lot of words, a lot of items. It's a little bit confusing, but it's actually a really complex domain to do something like that. And this API is really not that bad. So there it is. That's how you sort stuff in Livewire. I hope you dug it. This has been another deep exploration into a problem that I just have been having fun with. Like literally, I just woke up this morning and decided, let's learn how sortable, draggable stuff works and if we can implement it ourselves, which was a blast because I always thought, oh, you got to use a plugin because you can't do that by hand. But actually, you can if you just roll up your sleeves and dig in. Not necessarily recommending it per se. Do what you got to do, but hopefully you learned a little bit something else. Okay, I'm going to shut up. Goodbye.